agenda for the current and immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press star 9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board at rtd.directors@rtd-denver.com. Are there any hands raised?
Chair Guzman, there are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. I don't see any other participants in the queue, so we will close the public comment period at this time. We have 3 discussion items today on the agenda. The first item is for the strategic plan document. And I would like to ask General Manager and CEO Johnson, as well as Mr. John McKay, the Executive Business Partner, to present this item. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, all. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. And as indicated, I'm joined by Executive Business Partner McKay. The intent of this item today is to orient the board to staff's intention relative to updating the strategic plan just from a ministerial vantage point, recognizing back in August of 2021, the Board of Directors adopted a strategic plan that consisted of a vision, mission, values, and 4 strategic priorities. Those elements of the strategic plan were agreed upon during the course of several work groups, study sessions that were held with members of the leadership team, in addition to a special workshop retreat that was had with the board of directors in June of 2021, recognizing the adoption of the various elements I just outlined. Considering this is a board-approved document, nothing can be modified relative to those elements I outlined without the board's approval. Where we sit today is that our intent is to do a reprint of the strategic plan, recognizing the input we received from the Office of the State Auditor when there was a misunderstanding relative to what had not happened with the strategic plan. And in doing so, I am going to yield the floor to Mr. McKay to orient you all what the intent would be going forward. And this is merely a discussion item as we are convened this morning. Mr. McKay, I will yield the floor to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Not much to add on top of that, just that the board adopted the scorecard, the annual performance scorecard, back in October of 2024. That was an update to the very central core of the strategic plan that has information about the metrics and the success outcomes and strategic priorities associated with the strategic plan. In the RTD response to the Office of the State Auditor back in August of 2024, the staff or the response did acknowledge that we would be coming back to the board in the March timeframe with a recommended action regarding the readoption of the strategic plan in its printed form. And in the following month's board meeting, we'll be bringing back a delineation of those items that staff can tweak without the board's approval, and those which staff cannot. So that will be coming in the March timeframe. This is just the discussion item associated with that, just to follow up with any questions. We can answer those before the next month's meeting. But at this point, I am open to questions from the members.
Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Kroll?
I just want to thank you, Chair Guzman. This is Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. I just want to put in a plug for the training session upcoming for the board members on Thursday afternoon regarding agency performance. You all had asked for that training to be moved up, and so we did that in accordance with your request as a group of incoming directors. And so there'll be a fair amount of discussion too at that juncture around how we got to the performance metrics that the agency is being measured by, and that's a direct result of the work this group did with GM and CEO Johnson with respect to the strategic plan.
Director Guchenritter?
Yeah, thank you. I was looking at the strategic plan scorecard and was, apologies if I missed it, but the reporting cadence says annual, and I'm just curious at what point in the year, how frequently is that updated? Is it real time? That's the nature of my question.
Mr. McKay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To speak to that, the annual cadence right now is for the employee surveys. Those have been conducted in April of each year, and the customer and community surveys have been conducted later in the year in the August or September timeframe for the last 3 or 4 years. For this year, we're syncing those up in April, so we'll have good information for everybody. We'll be presenting to the Performance Committee in late May or early June of this year, I'm hoping, so that we'll have the data back from all of those surveys so that those can be reviewed, and some of that information can be used to leverage budget changes for the 2026 cycle. But right now, most of the, if you look at the scorecard, most of the metrics are predicated upon annual survey data because those metrics tie up to the strategic outcomes. So, Net Promoter Score, for example, for customers is predicated by the survey data that we garner every year. So there are other metrics, including on-time performance for bus and some financial metrics that are on a more frequent cadence. But by and large, the customer, community, and employee survey informs the metrics on the scorecard on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Just waiting to see if anybody else raises their hand. I don't see any. Right. The second item is fourth board briefing documents. I would like to ask Jack Kroll, Board Office Executive Manager, and John McKay, Executive Business Partner, to present this item, please. Who is going first?
I'm happy to just give a brief introduction to this item. For those of you who were present at the retreat on Saturday, I made mention as we were all departing that this would be on your agenda for today's meeting. The goal here is to get board feedback on the items you all wish to see in the board briefing documents. So I'm hopeful that many of you have had the opportunity to take a look at the board briefing documents and have some feedback ready to go. Couple things to note on this. One is these are compiled every month of the year, typically right in the lead up to the monthly board meeting. These are still compiled in August and December, even though those months typically don't have a regularly scheduled board meeting occurring in them. The goal of these documents, or this document, is to provide information critical to you all for assessing the performance of the agency, which is why we've decided to bring this discussion item to you all here, to ensure that you're getting the right information in the right format at the right time. We also, in our weekly email to the board from the board office, provide a hyperlink to the website where all of the board briefing documents are maintained. And with that, I'm happy to share my screen and yield the floor to the Executive Business Partner, McKay, to see if he has anything else he'd like to add.
Thank you, Jack. If you're going to the table of contents, that would be helpful. Perfect. Thank you. So these are the typical items that the board sees on a monthly basis. So the unaudited monthly financial statements, agreements with other entities, monthly purchasing activity, and so on. The bus and rail operations service availability and headcount information. Some of these items are duplicated on the performance dashboard. And so there is an opportunity now to sort of streamline this larger document if it's the intent of the board to remove some of these items, because this document, the danger is that this could become unwieldy and it could become too much to be useful on a monthly basis. In particular, the monthly purchasing activity and new contracts, that was an item that was requested by a board member a few years back. And the risk management claim settlements is sort of a new item within the last couple of years. These items are, that was absolutely necessary for us to publish for transparency's sake. But is this document the appropriate vehicle through which they should be published? That's the question before you today.
Directors, are there any questions or comments? Director Busick.
I think Geisinger was first, but I'm happy to go ahead and whatever you want to do. Okay.
Sorry, I just looked, I finally got to the page on the screen with everybody, so you're first in queue, so.
Okay, I'm
Right.
talking then. Yeah, so to the extent that we have things on our dashboard, I don't believe we need to replicate them in the board briefing document because that's just a duplication of not just information, but effort because it takes staff time to do both of these different things. So to the extent they're on our dashboard, I think we can take them out of the board briefing document. It's good information to have, and for the newer directors, and Lynn, you'll remember this, we used to get presentations at every board meeting on each and every one of these things. So it's much more streamlined for our purposes as well. So yeah, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Geisinger.
Thank you. You know, the whole checkbook purchasing thing, as Mr. McKay said, came out of one director's desire to have the checkbook in there. I find it sort of annoying because it takes up a couple of hundred or maybe 250 pages of the whole thing. So the critical parts to me are you know, the financial and the bus operations, rail operations, and some of those things. I'm not sure, I haven't looked in the last couple of weeks at the performance dashboard, but my hope is that it is picking up, you know, it just wasn't robust enough. So my hope is that it's picking up a lot of this information and getting it out there so it's out there for the public and for us. In terms of Vince's point of not putting them both places, you know, I'd have to think about that. I'm not sure if there's value in having them both places. I certainly hear the question about whether it takes a lot of staff time. In terms of other things in there, I know I've requested this before, but I hear it from a lot of people, is that Jeff Becker used to do that chart that showed number of boardings by route with the amount that RTD has to subsidize. So I thought it was a great tool for us to see what buses, what trains are working well for us, are busy and not costing us as much, and what other ones we need to look at. So I continue to hope that we can bring that back along the way. Thanks.
Director Nicholson, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. I actually, great minds think alike, Lynn. I wanted to echo the exact one of the things I'm about to say is the exact same point. I think the financial data by route is something that would be extremely helpful, not just to me, but to the public as well. And I'd add to that, I think the on-time and service availability by route, which it should be fairly easy to pull from, I think it's RideCheck Plus or one of the other databases that we have, just to give us a sense and the public a sense, what lines are working well, what lines are not working well over the previous month. So I would really, that's the first thing that I'd like to, really would love to see in that. The second would be an executive summary. I think, you know, it's a lot of data and being able to have, you know, a 2-page summary that calls out, you know, hey, you should pay attention to these 10 items in this 50-page document, you know, that you might be interested in, would be really, really helpful, I think, to a lot of directors who may or may not actually go through and try to pick out all the interesting stuff in a really large document, so it could facilitate perhaps more useful conversations at the board meeting if we had something like that. So,
Is that everything?
that is all. I'll put my hand down.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to call on Director Catlin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. I echo Lynn's sentiments regarding the checkbook register. I think I think for transparency, it's nice to have it, but rather than embedding it in the board briefing documents or the dashboard, why can't we just provide a link to it and it's available for those who are curious enough to go in and see line by line what is being spent? So other than that, I think we're making good progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Director Larson.
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with Director Gusinger's and Director Nicholson's comments about boardings and subsidization by route and on-time service availability by route and the executive summary. And also everyone else's comments about the check information. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Busick.
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to give a thumbs up on the check register stuff. I remember that where that came from. So, and also the subsidy information is pretty helpful too. So thanks. That's all I had.
Thank you. Director Geisinger.
Yeah, just one other thought, which is, excuse me, Vince mentions that in the past we go over all of these in every meeting, and I don't think that's necessary, but I would like to see us see some of this data brought into the meeting. And when Eric was chair, Davidson, he started talking about some of the data in his chair's report. And, you know, Deborah, I don't know if you'd want to include this in your CEO's report or if we would want to add a standing piece where some piece, it wouldn't have to be everything, but, you know, maybe we're bringing out and talking about, you know, the fact that our sales tax is down from certainly from what we budgeted and a little bit from last year, and you know what that means for us as we move forward. I think that having those conversations help the public and help us as well to keep them top of mind.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gutschenritter.
Thank you. Yeah, just a thought. I was thinking about having a section or just somehow covering like capital projects or key projects that are ongoing. I think it'd be nice just to have a summary of what's going on there, progress, key things to be aware of. For me personally, I think that'd be helpful.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Yeah, I want to echo Director Gutenritter. I think, you know, there's a lot of interest in, for example, the, you know, Colfax BRT, the I-25, you know, and, you know, some of the station upgrades, any of those big, expensive things that the public is going to notice, care about, be impacted by. The slow zones is another one where, you know, if we had just basic information on as much as we know about when the slow zones are going to be lifted, if we, you know, that kind of stuff. I think that having that in a clean, you know, easy format for people to, you know, get the basics so that when they get questions about it, they have the simple information they can convey to, you know, customers and constituents. That would be huge. So thanks.
Thank you. I would, CEO Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you had something to add, I was reserving my comments for the end. If there was something that you wanted to impart.
Just very generally agree about the checkbook comment. And I think bringing up highlighted information that we need to look at is important. I would try to keep it within the strategic plan, something that is relevant to the 4 pillars. And I think that's how we plan to proceed with this committee this year in our ongoing conversations with you and our one-on-ones, where we're looking at a specific area as we go forward. But there might be something that comes up that we need to discuss that's intermittent to that. I do like the suggestion that Director Geisinger gave about attaching it, you know, whatever that highlighted piece is. I really did appreciate that former Chair Davidson was able to do some of that at the board meetings, but, you know, maybe we can work together a little bit closer on how we do that in this committee. I would caution and recommend to everybody that we consider as we go forward that we do have in particular certain things like the slow zones. There's a whole web page dedicated with very accessible and ready to read and access information for the public. And it was designed for that purpose, to be transparent. And so some of that is new directors coming on board and needing to get very comfortable with our website and being able to use that as a tool as you go out and knowing what those links are. But they're pretty common sense, rtd-denver.com, and then slow zones or media relations or learning the tags so that you know what they are is really helpful. And then finally, I think the financial data is important. Sans checkbook, link to that if you need to, but I really do want to see the forecasts and where we're at in the fiscal year. I think as a member of both finance and this committee, I would like to continue seeing some of that documentation because it's just so relevant to what we're doing and understanding what's trending and what's not. And the public pays for the system through sales and use tax. And so that particular set of information is very relevant to what we do and understanding how that works. That's all I have to say. Deborah, sorry, Madam CEO, it is your turn.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman. I was going to say something very similar in reference to all the feedback. Thank you very kindly for that. Recognizing the intent of the Performance Committee was to delve into certain areas relative to performance. That's what the intention is going forward. So, for instance, what Director Geisinger put forward about looking at some of the performance data, that's the intent. Further to the point, Committee Chair Guzman, which you raised relative to the information that we have readily available on our website, we can embed that in the document if that's easier for members of this committee, the board as a whole, as well as the general populace. More so, I heard reference and Director Geisinger referenced a former employee that preceded me, but I do know what she's speaking about. We're talking about a service report, and then I heard routes lines. It would be encompassing both bus routes and rail lines, but also it's critically important to keep in mind that people in this district can utilize park and ride lots, which this agency subsidizes. So I'd have to caution as we go forward, that would be something that we would include as well, because taxpayer dollar sales and use tax do pay for the park and ride lot. So that's a critical piece as we go forward as well. And then recognizing, while some people may not use bus routes and light rail lines, we heavily subsidize our paratransit programs, which is a critical point as well. And we'd be remiss not to factor that in, keeping in mind the large subsidy that the agency provides to have the American with Disabilities Act of 1990 supplemental paratransit service, as well as Access on Demand, which is a supplemental premium service to paratransit. So just wanted to call that out. So we will endeavor. I'll be working with Committee Chair Guzman and Vice Chair Guchenritter as we put some of these elements together so it addresses the needs of you and your constituents and the public as a whole. Thank you.
Mr. McKay? You're on mute, sorry.
Thought I clicked the button. Just wanted to call out that in the next discussion item, the committee will be looking at the draft work plan for the Performance Committee, and in that work plan, there are items on a quarterly basis. There are the in-depth conversations that the staff will bring to the board with respect to the strategic outcomes. And that's notwithstanding any other information that could be provided to the board, but there is at least a scheduled intent to bring forth information about, financial success, employee ownership, that sort of thing on a regular quarterly cadence. At least that's in the draft work plan, assuming that the committee will adopt that.
Thank you. I just, for the record, want to point out I missed the addition of Board Chair Bouquet, who has joined this meeting, and I want to make sure that's on the record. Are there any other comments or questions? Chair Bouquet, I saw your hand go up and then go down. He may not be able to speak.
Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to get recognized for the record, and the comments that Ms. Johnson already made in regards to these resources are already actually out there when it comes down to information. So don't want to repeat myself, but just wanted to be recognized also for the record. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. All right. Are we comfortable there, everybody? Head nods. All right. Then let's go on to our third and final item, which is the 2025 Performance Committee Work Plan. In agreement and conversation, just for full disclosure for everybody's sake, with Chair Bouquet and the speed at which we had to work in the beginning of the year, we did delay focusing so heavily on our work plan to get our other work finished immediately. That was on a time schedule that required it. And so we will have most likely prepared and more informed work plan for approval in the March timeframe from this committee to go back to the board. And that's, having a month of focusing intensely on our work before we needed to jump into planning for the rest of the year. So I just want to let everybody know that we have not made any final plans, and this is the beginning of that conversation. And so there may be some things that we need to bring up as we did at our retreat for this particular committee. And the reminder that even when we pass it out of the committee, it's not a finalized etched in stone plan. Things will change, both on the side of the general manager, CEO, staff matters that come up, survey results that come in and may come in on time and be finalized or may be delayed before our committee meets. So it will be a living document that we will have to adjust with along the way. And I know Vice Chair Guchenritter, as well as myself, are both committed to making sure that we try to get as much input on this as possible as we move forward so that we have a very robust year and we have a work plan that is well balanced to get our work done and focus on the right work and meet all of our requirements. So with that, I would ask the General Manager and CEO Johnson, as well as Jack Kroll, the Board Office Executive Manager, to present this item, please.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Once again, Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. You outlined very succinctly what the intent is going forward, and it's my intention to be working in conjunction with you and Committee Chair Guchenritter. As it stands now, these items that are included are the things from staff perspective relative to what we anticipate going forward, considering the previous discussion we had relative to the board briefing materials. We can identify topics whereby we will do a deeper dive from a performance, agency performance vantage point that we can incorporate in. So I look forward to that discussion with you and the Vice Chair. With that, I'll yield the floor and see if Mr. Kroll has any additional comments. Thank you.
Mr. Kroll.
Thank you, Chair Guzman, and thank you, CEO Johnson, Jack Kroll, Executive Manager of the Board Office. I just want to point out there is one addition to this work plan subsequent to conversations and feedback received following your discussion on this item in January, and that is in May, we've added a review of the assessment tool. I think it's really important for this committee as well as incoming directors to have a good grounding in where that tool came from and the process that led to its development and where it stands now. So we've added that, but certainly this is a time and place, and I would encourage if there are ideas that you all have that you would like to see on this work plan, now is a great opportunity to share those out for the committee chair and vice chair and GM and CEO Johnson to contemplate as part of your work this year.
Thank you. Just a couple of reminders that came out of our retreat. Director Larson and Board First Vice Chair O'Keefe will be working together on timelines that align finance and planning with the goal setting for the agency, for the general manager CEO for the coming year, so that those can work cohesively. That will be work that ultimately comes back to this committee in some form or another. So keep that in mind, and it will require an adjustment on our work plan later in the year when we have more information on that. I saw some hands, so I am ready for your feedback and input. Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. I think one of the things that would be really helpful for me in understanding like what this committee typically does on its work plan would be to get copies of previous years' work plans for performance. I kind of have a better sense of the stuff that comes up on OSS and the stuff that comes up on finance and planning, but it's hard for me beyond what is on the work plan from staff. I'd love to see like what stuff other directors in the past have added to the work plan for performance.
Mr.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to call on Peggy. Director Catlin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's why I had my hand raised. This committee has evolved enormously over the past 7 years, and Mr. McKay might recall this, but we used to meet at best quarterly, usually twice a year with this committee. This is only the second work plan that we have developed. The first one was developed last year. It's become a much more robust and sophisticated process than what this group had done before. It used to be called the GM CEO. It wasn't even called a performance committee. We didn't even look at agency performance. It was strictly meeting with the GM CEO, and it was typically meetings between the chair and the general manager. So we have really taken on a lot more, and I think it's for good in this committee than what had previously taken place. So just for the new directors, especially, we're still evolving, and it's going to get better. And I know the kerfuffle that took place at the end of last year, as you all were coming on, I said no good deed goes unpunished. We very well could have adopted the short-term goals at the end of last year, but we had hoped to get new director input. And so this work plan, like I said, it's only the second one. Chris, you're not going to find anything in the archives of RTD that shows any kind of a structure to this particular committee. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
And Director Busick and Director Geisinger probably have some perspective, and I know John McKay, you probably do too. Going back,
GMOC.
GMOC, and so I just wanted to kind of emphasize that, and you all and we all have an opportunity to shape this to be the meaningful committee that we intend it to be. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Director Bouquet?
Feel free to call on committee members first if you like, also Director Guzman, but I'm happy to speak.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Director.
perfect. Thank you so much, sir. Director Guzman hit on, or Committee Chair Guzman hit on the idea of the evaluation of the 2026 goals and also the short-term goal setting process. As mentioned at the retreat, this will come to that committee, even though Director Larson and Director O'Keefe are going to be the ones kind of evaluating as a working group. It'll be ultimately up to this performance committee to look at that work and go forward with it. Talking with the GM CEO, we really have to have this prior to July. In all honesty, the latest we should be going at is June, so that they can start setting their budget. And again, as mentioned, it is a twofold process. It's not only the process of setting the 2026 goals up or short-term goals up for our GM CEO, it is also the process of making sure we have the most efficient process. I just wanted to add some weight to that even though those two directors will be working that as a working group and exploring, it will come to this performance committee to overview, and appreciate your guys's willingness to look at it.
Thank you. Jack, can we just make a note on the work plan that May-June timeline is something we should be expecting it for?
Chair Guzman, if I may, there are a number, so absolutely duly noted. I just want to point out there are already a number of items that were placed onto the work plan relative to the timeline for the GM and CEO's 2025 performance appraisal and 2026 goal setting process. And so there certainly the deadline is being imposed of having all that sorted by June. But for example, we have a check-in on the GM and CEO performance appraisal and 2026 goal setting timeline scheduled for April, as well as June. So, and then there's an additional one in September. So this will be something that you all track on pretty consistently over the course of the coming year.
Great, thank you. Director Busick, I apologize. Thank you for waiting.
Yeah, no problem. And that's my point as well, the 2026 goal setting, to make sure that maybe we need another one in May, because if the goal is to try to get it locked down by the June timeline, we're going to need not just the ad hoc, the two people, then this committee, and then the full board weighing in on it as well. So we got to make sure that we have. We're talking about this today, but no, I mean it's going to be upon us before we know it, and hopefully at the board meetings, I think our chair is still on. Make sure that when these things are on a performance committee agenda, that the full board is made aware of it and invited to attend, so that we don't come out of performance committee and say, here's all this hard work we did, and then have it, picked apart by people that didn't bother to participate. Thanks a lot.
Chair Bouquet.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Director Busick, you hit on that. There's a lot of work that gets done, and I know it isn't, pardon me, an early meeting with this 8:30 timeline on Mondays. But again, Committee Chair Guzman, Committee Vice Chair Guchenritter, those are going to be good resources for you to send feedback potentially. And keep yourselves in the loop when it comes down to performance if you're not part of this committee. So yeah, just added weight to that, because this will come to the full board and we ultimately will make discussions and decisions on it. So reach out to your committee chairs if you have questions.
Great, thank you. Just checking in because all of this has to do with our wonderful General Manager and CEO, Deborah Johnson. Do you have anything to add to that conversation at this time?
Committee Chair Guzman, if I may yield the floor to General Counsel Snyder, her hand's been raised, so it may be
Oh,
something
sorry.
wants to clarify. Thank you.
It's the same color as the background on my computer and I didn't see it. I apologize. Please proceed.
That's okay. Yes, so thank you, Chair. Speaking of things that will be upon the board before you know it, as you might recall, the compensation philosophy that the Board of Directors adopted did state that the board would endeavor to start conversations with the GM and CEO about whether to further extend her contract 18 months out from the termination of the contract. So I just wanted to flag that will be upon you in November of this year. And so to the extent those conversations start and whatever those end up looking like, you all might be in a position, or the board might be needing to look at starting a recruiting process for the next GM and CEO. So I just wanted to flag, I know it's off in the not too distant future, but I just didn't want anyone to lose sight of that timing.
Noted. Thank you so much. All right. Any other discussion? Mr. Kroll.
Thank you, Chair Guzman. I just want to point out very quickly here, and I'm going to share my screen, but it won't take me long to get my point across here. But to Director Nicholson's request, I think it was a good one. Unfortunately, as Director Catlin pointed out, there's not a lot of previous work plans to provide a roadmap for you all, but the committee and the board worked hard late last year to update the definition of the performance committee in the bylaws, and that is printed here at the top of the work plan and also found in the bylaws as well. And the hope with including that information at the top of the work plan was to get folks thinking about, okay, this is the role of the committee. These are the types of things the committee should look at. And so what should we add to this work plan that reflects the roles and responsibilities of the committee? And with that, Committee Chair Guzman, I have nothing further to add.
Awesome. Thank you. So fellow directors on this committee, anybody else that's listening in that wants to chime in, please email comments for the work plan that you may have through the form. The form is still the way to do this. I'm going to double down on that with Chair Bouquet and Jack to just have everything in one place. I know we did receive a couple of comments. There's some things that went to different committees that might be appropriate here, some things that might be appropriate for other places that we need to discuss and try and figure out where the best place for the information to be presented is. But all ideas are certainly welcome. So I know that we were supposed to have all of that in for the retreat, but because we delayed this committee's work, I believe the form is still live. Is that correct? So you can still access it and send it in. If you read through that definition of what this committee is all about and have some ideas, that would be a great place to have it so we can figure out what we're working on and what the priorities might look like from multiple directors so that we can engage in that kind of conversation and sort this out. I'd like to keep everything well ordered and be able to balance the work for the rest of the year. I think that's sometimes where I have seen we have tripped up a little bit by not planning out far enough ahead and then everything hits at once in the busiest time of year for all of the committees. We're all scrambling to try and read through massive amounts of paperwork or understand huge concepts. So let's do ourselves the favor and create this together in a way that provides us the best path forward. All right. We have made it through all of that. Vice Chair Guchenritter.
Yeah, I just had a question, and sorry if I missed this information, but is there a process in place for 360 feedback? I'm curious, does CEO Johnson, does her direct reports provide upward feedback outside of just the employee surveys?
Mr. Kroll?
Oh,
I'll yield to GM and CEO
Thank
Johnson
you.
and add anything further.
yes. So thank you very kindly, Director Guchenritter, for that information. So there are several avenues in which I receive feedback directly from employees. As relates to 360 review, we did that just with this most recent endeavor, whereby there was input received from what I would deem to be colleagues that were randomly selected with the board's input. Those included individuals that are transit agency CEOs across the country, recognizing my involvement at a national level, and then those that are local, recognizing we're the only intermodal transit agency. There were individuals that, for instance, the executive director of DRCOG was included in that pool, the executive director of CDOT, the executive director of the Denver's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, just to name a few. As it relates to feedback relative to my performance from any employee, I have the general manager email address. I also have bi-monthly forums in which employees can attend, and I basically am instituting office hours. So those are the different avenues that I leverage. And then I have recurring one-on-ones, not only with my direct reports, but also a level down within the organization of some key divisions in which I confer with those individuals on a monthly basis. So hope that answers your question. Thanks.
I would also add, just because I know this and it's not often discussed, you know, our CEO goes to the divisions, shows up at the workplaces and the work sites at all hours of the day and night when it's appropriate to be there to meet people who are often maybe feeling a little forgotten because they're on that overnight shift and don't see everybody else that's busy at the office during normal business hours, and engages in conversations, invited me to go to the rodeo for the snowplows and encouraged me to get in and drive a truck, which I thought I was going to completely destroy, but I actually survived and nobody got hurt. So that was the good news. My time was long, but I think I did okay. I only hit one cone, if I remember correctly. So, you know, General Manager CEO Johnson is doing the work that we need her to do in the office from the thinking point of view and the strategizing and the planning and the execution of what we've given as policy, but also is very down to earth and boots on the ground with employees. And so that's also where she gets feedback from directly from frontline employees and backline employees that don't see the public very often, but are doing the work that keep us going. So if you don't know that, you know, maybe set up a meeting and find out when she's going to do that 2:30 a.m. Round in Platt or over at Annie Laddie and you know, meet her there, because it's quite a commitment she makes outside of regular business hours for this agency. Director Catlin, your hand is raised.
Yes, Vice Chair Guchenritter, on a more formal basis, and maybe I just missed this, but as part of the formal 360 review, GM CEO Johnson talked about, you know, peers that evaluated her. As part of that, we also had board members who, from this committee, who completed a 360 review, and then from a slate of potential direct reports for GM CEO Johnson, there were some selected at random that also completed the 360 reviews. So on a more formal basis, that was put in place for the first time last year. So I just wanted to kind of amplify what GM CEO Johnson said about that process. So there is a structure in place that allows for more formal feedback. Thank you.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just thank you, Director Catlin. Was aware of the board providing that 360 feedback. I just and know that GM Johnson is definitely out, boots on the ground, talking to employees constantly. But was just curious to learn what the formal on paper mechanism was for direct report feedback. I think it would be helpful, at least from a performance committee perspective, to see and hear that feedback, I guess directly and not necessarily, not as feedback, but formally documented, just to hear of all the great work that GM Johnson is doing in the eyes of her direct reports and hearing about the support. So was just curious to hear about that formal mechanism of her direct reports. Was aware of the board 360 setups, but thank you.
Yeah, I
CEO
just want to
Johnson.
make sure that you knew that there was a formal mechanism. And it was randomly selected so that it preserved anonymity among direct reports.
CEO Johnson, go ahead.
Yes, just one other element. It just dawned on me. I failed to mention. Last year around this time, I had convened an organizational workplace and design review, and that was another mechanism in which there was feedback that was provided with the help of a third party, whereby there were work groups and actually one-on-one engagements with members of the leadership team and senior managers and cross sections of the organization. So that was a formalized process as well, in which there was anonymity involved, because I'd like to hear feedback, but I don't want anybody to be fearful of any retribution or anything along those lines. So thank you.
Any other comments? Going once, going twice. All right. Other matters. Before I open the floor to other matters, next month we are scheduled to conduct the first of several deep dives into key organizational performance metrics. I would like to use some time now to give staff some general direction on what metrics we would like to explore next month. Ideally, the data we explore next month should be focused on one of the 4 strategic pillars: community value, customer excellence, financial success, and employee ownership. Are there any thoughts from the committee on this item? Director Larson.
Yeah, I would definitely like to dive deeper on the customer excellence measures. I actually had a request out to Jack to get more information on the surveys, and I'd also like to understand better some of the Transit Watch information that's provided, and see if we can get what more detail is available with that. And also anything we do to monitor kind of the condition of the buses and trains in terms of cleanliness or anything else. I would love to learn more about those issues.
Thank you. Other directors? Director Nicholson?
Yeah, so I think I'm really interested in how in community value. I think how we measure our value to the community is really important. And what we think of as community and who how we factor that in is a meaningfully significant question at this moment. So I think examining both how we define that and then how we measure it is going to be really important to me, because I know there are a lot of people who feel left out of that definition at the moment and unheard, and exploring ways to make them feel adequately included, I think, is important.
Thank you. If nobody else has anything, I am going to offer this with regard to financial success. I am concerned that since the goals have changed and the budget was already done, I would like to hear more information about what is needed to support the goals that are in place right now. And if any work needs to be done there to make changes to our budget and reapportion money in some way or recalculate matters in some way to support those goals. I think that's a really important piece of what happened last week and what we need to address going forward, because we now own those goals as directors alongside our GM, CEO, and the entire agency. So if we want success there, we need to talk about numbers and figure out if we have what we need or if we need to strategize on how to do things better. And given all of the changes at the federal level, and Deborah and I have talked about this, I apologize, CEO Johnson and I have talked about this with Denver City Council. In real life, real time, in front of them, we're asked the same questions. And I'm not sure that we have any more information today than we did when we were first asked, but I am deeply, deeply concerned about the financial pressures that we may run into if we're not cognizant of that. Some of that conversation certainly belongs to the Finance and Planning Committee. Some of it certainly belongs here in terms of matters of performance. But I think as we engage going forward, looking at what adjustments might need to be made, if a recommendation should need to be taken from one committee to another, I think all of the committee chairs would be willing to entertain those conversations and bring them through the appropriate channels to get back to the board. So I want everybody to consider those ramifications. And that matter did come up in the Finance and Planning Committee discussion during the retreat. But for our purposes, financial success is all of our success, and that's what helps us meet the goals. So as they were adjusted, so maybe we need to discuss adjusting the budgets. I would like to get some feedback on that. I am asking for feedback on that as we go forward in the appropriate time and manner. Are there any other thoughts from any other committee members? If not, please know you can email me. You can email Vice Chair Guchenritter. We will collaborate together with staff to get something robust and have a good conversation next week. It will be a long meeting. Plan not to have any hard stops because we might have to extend past our regular time. Fair warning. I'm even going to have to make adjustments on my schedule for that. But it's valuable time to be spent with the general manager and CEO to have that interaction, but also for us to continue getting our work done on different levels. Any other matters to discuss at this point? Director Larson.
I'm sorry, there's a meeting next week?
No, sorry, the next committee meeting.
Okay.
The performance committee. Sorry, did I say next week? I may have misspoke. I meant the next performance committee meeting in March. I apologize.
Okay, thanks.
Any other matters? Going once, going twice. All right. So the next meeting date is Monday, March 3rd. That was the meeting I was referring to. It will be a busy one. We may need extra time. Please plan accordingly. Our draft work plan has us set to take action on our final work plan on the strategic plan document discussed today, as well as conduct a deep dive into key organization performance metrics. Finally, we will have one of our 4 quarterly performance check-ins scheduled with General Manager CEO Johnson, which will be a conversation we hold in executive session. Just so you're aware, follow along. Questions, please email. If you need to get it out to more than 2 directors, I would highly suggest emailing it to Jack or to General Counsel Snyder, depending on the matter, and then it will be sent to the appropriate directors, just as a matter of course, to avoid any potential problems with questions that might be of a sensitive nature regarding our personnel. Any other comments? Last chance. Seeing none. The meeting is adjourned at 9:29 a.m. Thank you so much for your hard work. Look forward to hearing you. See you next time.